Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council to order. Our clerk will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I'd ask for a procedural motion to proceed in camera, moved by Councillor Hemmens, seconded by Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. And just for the sake of the record, I want to point out that all councillors are in attendance, save for Councillor Armstrong today, with Councillors Bonner, Turley, and Brown coming in via Zoom. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 7th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet for agenda items only is on the table by the double doors to my left. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. For those who are in attendance, masks are still mandatory in all indoor settings. Council members have been granted the authority to join meetings electronically. You can refer to the guideline sheet for reference, and I want to welcome Councillors Brown and Turley and Bonner, who are joining us electronically tonight. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. We have none, Ms. Gurry.
That's correct, Your Worship. No late items.
A motion for adoption of the agenda. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. I have a very short mayor's report tonight. I just want to advise that March 7th to the 13th is Food Waste Action Week. It's a global collaboration led by Love Food, Hate Waste, international partners to drive home the message, wasting food feeds climate change. The National Zero Waste Council and Love Food, Hate Waste Canada are proud to join our global partners for this inaugural global event, and we invite you to join us. Each day, the city will share information about the climate impact of household food waste and food-saving tips and strategies to inspire Canadians to make their food go further and waste less. And I think it's only appropriate, recognizing that hundreds of millions of people around the planet go to bed hungry every night. This is especially brought home tonight by the suffering of the people in the Ukraine. And so this is a good week to consider your impact on climate change and tailor your food habits accordingly this week. I am delighted to indicate that we have no other formal items after the Mayor's report till we get to the first presentation tonight, which is a presentation from Tilikum-Lalem Aboriginal Friendship Centre, Together on the Pathway to Reconciliation. I want to welcome my old friend and distinguished citizen of Nanaimo in British Columbia in Canada, Grace Elliott Nielsen, PhD, OBC, Sitzimus matriarch as she calls herself now, which must mean she's making a concession to age, which I can't believe for a moment. And also the longtime executive director of the Tilikum-Lalem Aboriginal Friendship Centre. Grace, welcome tonight. Much looking forward to your presentation. I just wish to warn Council that we disappear off the screen for the actual video once it's playing, so don't be shy when we all disappear, those of you watching at home. We are yours.
Thank you very much for meeting with us tonight. We have been waiting to prepare you for some of the work that we do, and Together on a Pathway of Reconciliation. For those of you maybe who haven't read all the information from the 2006 status from Canada, 85% of Aboriginal people live off reserve. Many of them are status, some are non-status, but many are band members who have no place to live on reserve as well. So we're hoping that the reconciliation might inspire Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples to transform Canadian society so that our children and grandchildren can live together in dignity, peace in this community. Just to let you know, when we're talking about the concerns, we provide 368 hampers every 2 weeks. And that's to the bands that may not provide hampers to their people, to non-status, Métis, and also non-Native people. We have just in our health center, but not Salish Lalem, and our education center, we have about 4,500 people that went through last year, and that doesn't include, when I say 4,500, that's the people that have, they always say in government, that's one visit, but the people that we have come more than one visit, so it's a lot more than that. So we do have plans to incorporate, hopefully, larger building for our young moms, because the young moms we have come into our small building that we bought on our own are the moms that have children that they may lose, or moms that may lose their children if they don't come in and have services from the social workers, the therapists, and the nurses. So it's wraparound services. We've been very concerned about this because we have seen children of 4 go into foster care. We've seen a lot of kids go into foster care the last 2 years because of lack of living, lack of ability to have that wraparound support. So I'm not, Mr. Mayor, after you for more dollars, but I want you to know where we're at and the work that we're doing. And we have been since 1965. And in 1968, we were incorporated. And in 1965 was Auntie Ellen, great Ellen White, that did so much work, and I did a lot of work with her, and we had the traditional dance groups. So from there, in a little house down on Needham Street, we're built up now to 7 buildings, which we have worked really hard to get to this place. But the need is so great, and we continue to look for ways and services to provide the children from prenatal to elders. And so we do have a lot of clients, and in that period of time, we have continued to work with COVID for those that are really needed the services, and our staff have been very careful to not to be careful so that they don't get COVID, but they've continued to work. So we have not shut down any of our buildings in that time. So thank you for having us here tonight. And yes, I think that's all I have to say at this point. So
Thank you very much.
if you have any questions, and
Would you like the video played before questions?
If that's all right, I think that would be best, please. Yes.
okay.
We'll turn it over to the technical people.
My name is Grace Elliott Nielsen. Elliott was my maiden name, and my traditional name is Teoctonach, which is my great-grandmother's name. And Teoctonach was a medicine woman and a healer, and I also feel that I have a lot of connection with my ancestors. And I feel their guidance a lot of the times in the work that I do. And I know the elders always said to me that, I said, I'm going to start working on building community, working with children. I always kind of felt a strength, though, that I needed to do something. And I always said, I don't want to see children in pain or feel less than like I did. I'm going to do whatever I can to make that change in my life. That was my life's journey I felt I needed to do. I'd been really negotiating for an ABE program because there wasn't an Aboriginal one. So I kept it up, and I asked Nanaimo Band, I asked Nanoose Band, and they came in as a partner, and we got the first Aboriginal ABE program. Do your own work, because you can't help anybody else. You can't help yourself unless you do your own work.
All kinds of people come to Tilikum. It's every door is the right door, and you find your place, and you start out with different programs and services. However, everyone is guided and led into doing their own healing to move forward in a good way and to share that healing and that knowledge with future generations.
And what makes Tilikum so incredibly powerful is that they hire people that align with the culture of Tilikum and the Indigenous people, which is a collective culture. all of my trauma work and everything that I do with my Knowledge Keeper Wayne is everything comes through a collective lens, which is reflective of the Indigenous culture versus the individual philosophy of a colonized culture. And that's what makes Tilikum so incredibly special.
You know, the position I have with working with the children downstairs, I've been honored to have a position down there working with them and doing the smudging and doing the drumming and watching them dance. You know, they've given me back my own childhood, and they've showed me what innocence is and what purity is, and what life would be like without trauma. That's what the little ones down there teach me. And that's my goal, is to help others feel the same way I do, and to teach them that we are all the same, in that no matter how much trauma's happened to us or what's happened to us in our past, we can all heal.
For cultural recreation, we provide after-school programs, youth drop-in programs, youth group programs, summer camp. We do certain events for Aboriginal Day, special holidays, have activities for our children and youth and their families within the community, because it just seems that the population that we are servicing, they are a vulnerable group that live in poverty, so it's really challenging to find activities at free costs so that their kids can, you know, participate in sports and different recreation activities. A lot of the prevention work needs to be done at a really, really early age to have these healthy young people. So if we can do it earlier, so with daycare, we're able to instill a lot of those values, and then also the support to the families with these little ones. Because again, I think that's something that we're trying to address and change, is how families function and how, they role model to their kids as well, and giving them healthy choices and the support. Tilikum, looking at the needs of the community, we saw that a lot of kids were being apprehended right at birth at the hospital with some of these young mums. And how is it that young mums are supposed to know how to parent when they've been brought up in foster care? They don't have family supports. And yeah, being a new mom is a challenging thing. So with the young moms, we're able to support them and in the way they're living.
As friendship centers don't get a whole lot of funding, and we've managed to get grants, and we've been able to, I think we have 68 programs now and 110 or 115 staff.
Good afternoon, Tilikum Mayla.
Transfer of knowledge, transfer of culture, transfer of everything comes out through the bridge building of elders. That memory, that experience is so critical. It's a model of history that just continues to unfold in a wonderful, wonderful way.
So we have been doing the novel study, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. And today what I'd like to do is I would like to review reservation life as experience.
So we've been trying to support the community as much as we can with different things like food hampers to try and alleviate some of that stress. So we created our youth and elder building, and we did a model where they could interact with one another. Again, trying to bring that connection and that bridge back to elders and youth, and trying to create that model. And I think it's been valuable for those youth, and then to have those connections to the elders.
Still to this day, I try to help people with addictions. And I'm grateful to Tilikum for all this opportunity that they have given me to help. And hopefully I can continue to do that. And smudging is just a preparation, cleansing ourselves and cleansing the space and blessing the pole.
We decided that we wanted to do something for the murdered and missing women, and then we put a proposal in to do a pole. And the pole we thought would be very good to have the eagle on top with his wings spread out to the sky and his spirit to protect the young woman that would be the pole below the eagle. And then the second piece would be the young woman that representing all the young murdered and missing women and representing the spirit and the protection from the universe, and always remembering the mothers and daughters and the young women that had gone missing. So it's not only important for the spirit, but it's important for the family. It brings it to life, brings it to love, brings it to connection, and connection is so important. I'm hoping we can get back to that point where everybody can just work together to create that place where everyone feels safe and are able to live in peace.
First rate, thank you. First question, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Oh, sorry, it was left on.
Oh,
Councillor Turley has a question, Your Worship.
yep. Councillor Turley, please. You're going to have to unmute yourself, though. It's always comforting to know there are others who are just as bad with technology as I am.
There we are. We got it. The button was hidden. Through you, Your Worship, I was just kind of curious on the report we got on Nanaimo's urban and indigenous residents. Point number 2 was referring to Nanaimo's 2020 PIT count. And that term is new to me, so I have no idea what it meant. Perhaps somebody could enlighten me, please.
Please, the PEIT count?
Yes. P for Peter, I for India, T for Tango.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
It's the point in time count, Councillor Turley.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I don't see any questions, but if I may say a very sincere thank you from Council for you honoring us with your presence here tonight, and that's a wonderful presentation. And it never hurts to remind people who I think sometimes forget about how much work is done by Tilikum Lalem in the community, because you have so woven it into the fabric of this community and helped so many thousands of people over the years that it's like talking about the hospital. We just all take it for granted. So I see that when I start to speak, it always inspires somebody else to comment. So Councillor Gesselbrock, now, please.
Thanks, Your Worship, through you. Just from our earlier conversation, I was just curious. First of all, thanks for all the incredible work, and just curious, like over COVID, sort of what have been some of the impacts that you've noticed on the services and programs that you've been providing, and in addition to just sort of a lot of challenges we've been facing in the city with just the lack of housing availability, how that's been impacting as well, because I know that you do a lot of supports for people with that.
The lack of housing has been a big concern of ours, because I have never seen so many kids going into care. They don't have the support usually where they're going, or they can't afford to rent a place. I've seen families of 4 going into care, and that's mainly because they don't have a place to live. And the concern is that apparently there's more kids going into care than there was in residential schools going into residential schools. So we do have a problem. And we have a problem with families, communities. Housing is really difficult. People just can't afford the housing that's available. And even if there's a housing built, and apparently they're supposed to be low cost, there may be a few that are low cost, but not low enough for people to be who are able to afford that housing. A lot of hunger. As I just said to you, every 2 weeks we provide 348 hampers. And besides that, our hamper workers say that we have people coming in just for a little bit extra for their families. So when you think of the number of staff we have, I just would like people to realize how much work we do and how much we provide for the city and how many staff we provide jobs for. And there are all kinds of people we provide jobs for. We have a lot of our Aboriginal workers, but we have people of various ancestries, non-native people, young people who just can't find jobs anywhere else and keep those jobs. So I think I've been around, 50-some years. And I think what's been provided to the city, sometimes people just don't realize or understand. And so it would be nice to have some understanding of that. And if we're having reconciliation together, I think that we could do a little bit more about reconciling. We have our Murdered and Missing Women's Poll services April the 22nd, and we're sending out invitations to the community, the school district, the city council, Aboriginal people, and we hope that you'll be able to attend. But I really feel that there's a lot of things that are going on, and I feel very sorry for those people in Ukraine, because sometimes I think that's where we were at for a long time, and we still are. Especially if you live off reserve. You don't have very much notice or recognition, but you just keep working. So, and a lot of the times our funding gets sent somewhere else because some smooth talker comes in and says, oh, I'm going to do this and this and this, and that never happens. And those funds are gone. That may have gone to hundreds of kids in family camps or day camps. And maybe that sounds a bit harsh, but I just really want people to realize sometimes when you don't say anything, people just take it for granted. You'll always be there and you'll always do it. And it's a tough show.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And the next item is the 2021 Development Review. Mr. Lindsay, you're going to introduce that, and then we're going to hear from Mr. Holmes. And as I indicated earlier, given some complaints that were made earlier this week, I'm going to ask people to make sure they speak into the microphone, because apparently it's not me who's going deaf, it's you who aren't speaking loudly enough. And I have that verified by people who watch us at home, believe it or not.
Your Worship, I'll assume that's directed at me, so I'll do my best. Your Worship, happy to be back again. This is an annual presentation that we enjoy doing to Council, especially the last few years where there's been a tremendous amount of activity and investment in the community. It just gives us an opportunity to update Council on some of the more significant projects and trends. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Holm. I think he's set up now, and I'll let him take over. Thank you.
Mr. Holm, good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, Your Worship and Council. I'm hoping this is coming through clear. Thanks. Yeah, that's a difficult, obviously difficult presentation to follow. That was very inspiring and humbling and touching. This is more facts and figures, but important in that it's demonstrating good work that's happening around the city to address, for one, housing needs and employment needs and the like. So I'll try and give you a quick overview with some of the data and touch on some upcoming projects and give you some highlights. New single-family dwellings, still an important part of the housing sector. You can see here we've had 2021 was relatively close to an average year, 221 units created through new single-family residential building permitting. You can see the average there of 248 units. That's a 10-year average. So relatively strong year on the single-family housing side. An important part of single-family permitting, actually 64% of single-family dwellings are now coming online with secondary suites, and that's quite an important part of the housing stock in Nanaimo. Secondary suites have been permitted through the zoning bylaw in the city since 2005, and since that time there have been over 3,600 suites created through secondary suites regulations and guidelines that support legalization of existing suites, recognition of existing suites. So that's quite a substantial addition to the housing stock. Looking more broadly, we're looking now at total units coming online through various forms, and you're seeing here the average, the combined cumulative there of 674 units for 2021. That was made up of 220 multifamily, 221 single family, which I've already touched on. The 43 suites I'm actually referencing here, those are in existing dwellings. So in addition to the 43 suites showing here, there were 141 suites added to the stock in the 221 single family dwellings that were brought online. Looking at another metric that we look at is construction value by permit type. And you can see here the overall, the black line, the total construction value. Quite a strong year again last year, 2021. Actually the second highest year on record for the city next to 2019. And the total for 2021 was $271 million. That's $1 million in permitted construction value. You can see a couple trends here, a bit of a downward trend in multifamily, still relatively strong though, a bit down from last year, but relatively strong as representing the last 5 years, relatively strong years. You can see an uptick here in public spending on public institutional permits. Those are significantly, and I'll touch on a couple of these later, but the hospital, the ICU, that's quite a significant project. BC Housing obviously is bringing online some significant projects, as well as Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, and as well as the Nanaimo Correctional Center. And there are some other minor ones, but those are some of the bigger public contributions to construction industry in the city. So those are important contributions. And you can see here the average for the last 10 years is 223 million. So we had 271 million last year in permitted construction value. Actually interesting, just a little bit of this is about last year, but up to this point in this year, so for the first 2 months of this year, 96 million in construction value. So that's very significant. That's on par with 2019. Difficult to say, obviously, how the rest of the year is going to play out permitted construction value-wise, but we're looking at a very strong year going forward. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world, but at this point in time, we're predicting a lot of construction activity to continue through the year. And then I'm just going to have a quick look at where activity is happening around the city. The red dots represent, so this is 2021, this is housing starts, so dwelling units. The red dots are single-family dwellings, and the blue dots are multifamily dwelling. They're not scaled to represent the number of units in the multifamily dwellings, unfortunately. Maybe that's something we can look at, but you can see the distribution throughout the city. And this is compared to 2020 and 2021 side by side there. So you can see that there is a bit of concentration around, definitely around some of the urban nodes, some of the growth centers, and along corridors for the multifamily. For sure, you can see a trend there, and then you can see generally where the subdivision activities taking place, where we're seeing new single-family dwellings coming online, quite spread out around the city, actually. Now I'm going to touch on a couple of significant projects. There are many, many significant projects, but these are some of the top projects by construction value. I mentioned earlier the NRGH, the ICU addition, two-story addition. That's a $21 million project, so very significant and a great addition to the level of care provided at the hospital and the facility there. We have many residential apartments that I could pick from, but this one just south of downtown, along in the south end, $13 million project, 79 units. And another public investment in the city. This is a large addition to École Hammond Bay Elementary School, a $12 million project. So Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools has an ambitious investment program in place, and this is an example of some of that. Of course, this is another public investment, $12 million in the first of the four MOU supportive housing developments. This is again in the south end along Nicholl Street, and this is slated to open shortly. And again, $12 million, significant investment, 59 units, and the first of four, so there's 3 more coming. This is an apartment building of 27 units, a variety of number of bedrooms, supporting a variety of sort of an infill, variety of housing forms and an infill development in the Jinglepot area, and a $7 million project. Briefly, this is trying to demonstrate, so what I'm showing here is development permit applications. So numbers received versus the average residential unit per application received. So what this is, there's a bit of a trend here you can see over 10 years. The red line is indicating that we're seeing more units per application generally. And you can see the trend over time. We're still seeing relatively strong application numbers, but definitely larger applications by unit. So the average, you can see in recent years, the average has been 50, 60 units per application reviewed through development permit. We've had some as many as 250 units. We see many in the range of 150, 200 units. Not uncommon these days, where it was very uncommon 10 years ago to see anything of that scale. A little bit more on the application sort of volume, just touching on here. We've seen, so rezoning applications, 5-year average is 20 applications. We saw 17 last year. Development permits, 5-year average of 46, and 45 were the number of applications last year. Units approved in development permit. So development permit is a precursor to building permit. So we usually see what we're seeing here very strongly in recent years is applications coming through development permit will translate to building permit given the demand that we're seeing. It will translate to new housing units. So this is a bit of a preview to what we're going to see activity-wise. So units approved, you can see in 2021, 1,700 units were approved through development permit. The 5-year average is just under 1,100, so very strong year in units approved through development permit. So we expect that to translate into building permit activity this year. And then you can see the proposed units. Those are applications under review. So we're seeing already 1,350 applications under review in 2021 that again we'll see translate into strong future construction activity. Another couple of metrics here. These are kind of interesting. Board of Variance. It's a independent body that is in existence to give folks an alternative appeal to the bylaw requirements that are put in place by council. They can appeal, people can appeal to, where the bylaw causes undue hardship and they're proposing a minor variance. I won't get into details, but you can see relatively stable activity. The Board of Variance applications, development variance permit, another avenue to appeal council's bylaws. And there's actually a couple applications on tonight for development variance permit, and you can see relatively stable activity here too there, and on applications received and approved. Touch on subdivision activity a little bit. So you can see we had relatively strong output in the way of single-family lots coming online, although obviously a lot of those were eaten up through building permits. So you can see there's a lot been brought on. You can see actually under, if I'm looking at the total single dwelling lots in active PLA, so that's sort of the number, consider that sort of like the number in reserve. There are applications as a precursor to subdivision. You go through preliminary layout approval, gives you the sort of the recipe. It's the shopping list of what you need to do to, what somebody needs to do to get a subdivision approval. So we're seeing here that downward trend. We're seeing lots that were in active PLA. They're coming online through subdivision approval. So high demand is basically what's showing here with the downward trend. High demand for lots right now, and not surprising given the prices and the amount of activity we're seeing across the city in development. Again, a couple more metrics through subdivision, typically new parks created, and then the cash in lieu received, which varies year to year, just to give you an idea of what we're taking in. And this new assets, these are generally brought online through construction activity, either through building permit or subdivision. This is interesting if you look at the, say, for instance, odd number, but the, or odd metric to look at, but the number of new fire hydrants or new roads. You can see this year it looks quite like quite a drop in that figure. So what this is showing actually is there was a new manual of engineering standards and specifications that was that came into effect in 2020, in September of 2020. And for development in stream, they were given a 1-year grace period to have their developments approved before those requirements came into effect. So what actually happened here was up until September 2021, folks that were in stream approvals for subdivision could come in to have their subdivision approved under a construction agreement. So the lots have been created, but the works haven't necessarily been given substantial completion. The city doesn't hold those works yet. So this is just demonstrating, and it's a little bit complicated, but it's just demonstrating that there's sort of a knock-on effect to some of the standards, increases in standards and bylaw rates through development cost charge increases and things like that. So what we will see then is a lot of these assets, we're going to see a bump in assets in 2021 as the city takes those over from new development in that was trying to get in ahead of the change in the manual of engineering standards
Mr. Holm, am I wrong in the way I look at it, the new servicing, which I assume is, you know, pipe and underground services, et cetera, when the number drops off for 2021 by literally to a quarter of what was in 2020 and 2019 and 2018, I read that as telling me you're getting a lot more densification within existing service areas, or is that the wrong interpretation?
Your Worship, that's a good point. That's part of what we're seeing. Yeah. So there would be some new assets coming online through infill, densification like you're talking about, but a lot of what we're seeing here would be through subdivision, new roads, for instance. Those would be generally through subdivision. But you're right, as far as some of the other assets, they would be less, so more efficiently using assets through densification, I think that's a good point to highlight. Thank you. I'm going to try and get through this quickly. I've got a number of projects to highlight here. Many of them will be familiar. So these are development permits completed in 2021. 340 Campbell Street, that's in the downtown. It's 163 units. There's a building permit in for that now. 400 Fitzwilliam, 197 units. Building permit under review for that as well. 361 Albert Street, 23 units. So collectively there are 400 units in 3 projects in the downtown. Another couple to highlight, and I'll try to run through them quickly here. 135 Halliburton, 79 units. 388 McCleary, that's another address familiar to council. This is 133 unit seniors congregate facility. Another small infill project, 16 units on Prudhoe, small but important. There's a variety of housing for everyone and some good infill projects happening. Again, some public investments here. 59 unit supportive housing development at Nickel Street. The Nanaimo Correctional Center, that's the property at 3945 Biggs Road. That's a significant public investment. And then 51 units approved in development permit for 285 Prudhoe. Some more significant projects around town. 165 student housing beds at 326 Wakesaya. 550 Brecken, that's 87 units. 4961 Songbird, 98 units. 6030 Lindley Valley, that's another 150 units, and that's under building permit review right now. And then another smaller one in Lindley Valley area, 16 units for 5594 Lindley Valley Drive. And then just to touch on a couple of, it's not all housing. We're seeing these are industrial projects, Jordan Avenue and 10th Street as well. Another couple of significant developments, 1300 Junction in the south end. That's over 200 units in 3 buildings in the Chase River area. So that's quite a significant development for the south end. And then 3180 Island Highway, that's a mixed use development with a car wash and residential component. Just a little bit of a highlight on some of the upcoming projects. 77 Chapel is one that we'll be familiar with for council. It was proposed as a high-rise site a number of years ago. What we're seeing now is 154 units in 3 buildings. Different form, actually, a larger number of units proposed here, but that was an exciting one that's under review right now. There's one on Terminal Avenue here for 69 units in a 6-story form. And some of these, this one on Boxwood, 2229 Boxwood, that's townhouse form, 31 units. It's a neighbor to the Midtown Gateway project that you'll hear about highlighted through the capital projects that are coming up shortly here for a look into what's been going on the capital side. Another couple infill projects on Bowen Road, 41 units in a 3-story building at 2103 Bowen, and 21 units in a 5-story building at 1641 Bowen. So lots of infill in the corridors and in some of our urban nodes, the growth centers. This is the last slide of significant upcoming projects, but 149 units in 2 buildings at 6985 Island Highway. That's North Grove, if you're familiar with the far north end of the city, in behind the Michaels in that area. There are 3 residential apartments in there now. The proposal for this is phase 2, 2 additional buildings, 49 units. Another project on McRobb, 6330 McRobb, that's 88 units. And then a very significant project here, large-scale project at 6340 McRobb. This is actually coming as a development permit as well as a covenant amendment. This is proposed as 438 units. So that's in the McRobb area in the north end, so off Kalinda there. I'm just going to touch on very briefly just some other major initiatives. It's not all development approval. There's a lot of work to do, policy and bylaw wise, to try and to ensure that we're implementing priorities, objectives through development approval. Council's familiar with the STEP Code rezoning policy adopted this year that incentivizes STEP Code, accelerates STEP Code for properties going through rezoning. Community amenity contribution policy came into effect January 1st of 2022, but it was adopted by Council last year. Gives clarity and consistency, transparency to folks going through rezoning and seeking amenity contributions to help improve the community through that process. We do regular annual zoning bylaw general amendments as well this year. We did the first general amendment round for the parking bylaw, and some of that was to address, parking bylaw wise, was to address requirements for electric vehicle charging infrastructure to ensure that we're keeping pace with demands there. And the zoning bylaw amendments, some significant amendments there. The building permit function review, I was here last week with Mr. Moss to discuss the status of that. Very important. I won't get into the details there, but I think we did a fairly a good overview of that last week. I'm happy to take questions on any of this, of course. And that's all I had to add for development review for 2021. But as you can see, it was an exciting year, and we're off to an exciting start in 2022.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holm. Any questions? I'm not seeing any, but let me just extend on behalf of Council thanks to the department. I appreciate that there doesn't appear to be any slack period coming in your future. There certainly hasn't been in the past, but as we heard from Grace Nielsen tonight, Grace Elliott Nielsen, and we've heard from many others, we desperately need more housing in this community. So carry on and keep up the good work, and thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to your worship and council for your support, and exciting time to be on council, I'm sure, too. Thanks.
The next is the 2021-2022 capital projects. Mr. Sims and then Mr. Rosen.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's likewise a pleasure to be here in front of you this evening. We're just here to give a quick overview of last year's capital program, or capital infrastructure, and then just a sneak peek on the upcoming year for 2022. And it'll hopefully help council and the community have a bit of an understanding of the context for the capital plan as we build the next one out for 2023 going forward. I would say despite COVID, despite the disruptions in the supply chain, et cetera, that we've heard a lot about, the year was very busy. You'll see that in the numbers. I think 21 was a record year for our own capital projects. And I think what I'd like to do is acknowledge, I've said it before and I'd like to repeat it, is council's governance improvements and being so judicious in their governance has really helped our staff feel they have a strong platform to work from, and that translates throughout the organization and is really positive. Likewise, I'd like to acknowledge the staff who's running like crazy to keep up with these projects. And I can't help but also say thanks to the public, because community building, which I feel we do, is messy. You've got to break some eggs to make an omelet, but really incremental improvement all the time. So Mr. Rosen is here, and both of us are happy to answer questions on any of the projects or any of our processes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sims. Mr. Rosen, please.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you, Mr. Sims, for that introduction. So as Mr. Sims mentioned, this presentation is meant to be a bit of an overview of the capital projects, as well as a little bit of insight into what's planned for 2022. I'll talk a little bit about some of the financial statistics, as well as some of the challenges and hurdles that we're experiencing in delivering Council's program. So this slide shows a little bit of an overview of the substantial capital program the city has. You can see in 2021, we had about $120 million overall program. That's grown substantially for 2022. You can see the blue rectangles, those are the base budgets, and then the orange rectangles on top, those are what we call carry-forwards. Carry-forwards are the project funds that are moved from one fiscal year to the next, often because projects are in progress at the year end. So Council will be receiving a bit more information on these carry-forwards at the March Finance and Audit meeting. So this is a little bit insight into what's coming. You'll notice the 2021 to 2022 carry-forwards are a little bit larger than the previous year. This is mostly due to some large capital projects that were in progress at year end, and I'll talk a little bit about those when we get to them. This next slide, this is a little bit of a subset of the overall capital program. So these are the engineering and public works projects, and you can see it's still a substantial program, but slightly smaller than the overall corporate program. This is a bit of a breakdown in terms of the proportion of work that was completed in 2021, and you can see that a slightly larger portion was carried forward into 2022, and that's again just because of these in progress large projects that we had in progress at year end. So in terms of carry forwards, you can see 85% of them are projects that are in progress. So the vast majority of them are projects, and quite often these are ones that we've deliberately done this way. We've tendered them in the fall, for example, so we know they're going to span the fiscal year, and we do that deliberately for a number of reasons, to get good value, you know, spread the program out over the year, and so on. We have had some challenges this year, as Mr. Sims alluded to, and Mr. Holmes' presentation kind of highlights this to some degree. The city competes for the same resources as the private sector, both consultants and construction contractors and so on. So there's a lot of market demand for the services that we're out there procuring. There's also been a lot of challenges with supply chains, as I'm sure we've all experienced. It impacts the timing of materials and so on and so forth. We've also had some weather challenges and so on as well. So I'll just jump right into some projects here. So this is the Nanaimo Search and Rescue project that was completed as a partnership with the city and Nanaimo Search and Rescue. It was led through our Parks, Rec and Culture Department, and it's a successful completion. Front Street, this has been complete for a while now. We're getting some mostly positive comments on it. So this is a major sewer upgrade that was completed recently, major utility upgrade through Bowen Park and a trailway enhancement. It provides an important active transportation connection through the park and increased capacity for the city's population growth that we're seeing. So this is fire station number 1. This photo is a little bit out of date. I think they've got a little bit more of the cladding on now. So although the moving date is approaching, I believe it's in April, this project's been extremely challenging for the contractor just due to the various materials and the complex supply chain. So kudos to Kinetic Construction for keeping things on track for this one. So Metro Drive Phase 1. So this is complete, and the city's received a lot of positive feedback from the neighborhood and from users and so on. And I'm sure, as council knows, this project is the recipient of 3 awards, provincial, national, and international awards, in particular for the road intersection details that were used in this corridor.
I drive it for pleasure, try to once a week. It's a magnificent piece of roadway. Can't wait to see it finished.
I'm sure you'll be grateful when Phase 2 is complete. I've been driving it a lot lately, and I'm eager to have it completed. It's scheduled for completion in the summer of this year. This project isn't a high-profile public project, but it's an important underground utility upgrade that's necessary to help mitigate the risk of severe weather and climate change. We had some flooding in this area during 2016 and 2018. Unfortunately, this project, the contractor went bankrupt midway through the construction, so it's created a little bit of a delay. We've had to go through the bonding agency, and it's created quite a bit of additional work for staff and a delay, obviously. So we would really, at this point, we would really like to thank the neighborhood and the public for their patience with this as we work through this challenging process, dealing with the bond and getting the project wrapped up as soon as we possibly can. 4th Street. This is an active construction site, and when it's complete, it'll be another segment in that important active transportation link between VIU and the downtown. We expect this to be complete this year, about June, probably. So, for 2022, Council recently received a project update on the Midtown water supply, so I won't get into that in a lot of detail, but I'm sure, as you know, we've started to fall some trees in advance of the actual construction. Halliburton sidewalk. So this is the 700 block of Halliburton, and it's an important sidewalk segment that's missing on an important north-south corridor east of the Island Highway. So we expect construction to start on this potentially in March or April. Pedestrian upgrades. This is a large package of upgrades that's linked to the pedestrian unallocated funds that Council allocated out last year. We're anticipating construction on this will be in the spring and the summer. So carrying on from the segment on 4th Street that I was talking about, this is the next phase of that. So this is the Albert Street Complete Streets project. And it'll extend that important link from VIU into the downtown even further up through that S-curve that is definitely wanting for some improvements. There's some in-stream work here. We have to replace a culvert in the Cat Stream, so that constrains our timing. We have to do that work in August and September, and it has to precede some of the surface work. So that constrains our timing somewhat, but we're hopeful that this project will be complete in the fall. Terminal Avenue.
Councillor Martman has a question.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, before we get too many slides ahead, I just have to ask, because it's my neighborhood, any idea when Bruce and Albion is going to be started?
We have a contractor that we've secured, and we're just in the process of issuing a PO for this. I'm not sure exactly what their timing is in terms of that particular piece of the work. So we have one contractor that's doing all of these projects that are in the list. And so I don't have their schedule with me, but I would anticipate that it'll be done in the spring, potentially in the summer.
Okay, because, yeah, we were hoping it was going to be earlier this year, because I can tell you the pedestrian traffic at Bruce and Albion is even more than Bruce and 6. I'm by there every day, so the sooner we can get it done, the better. Thank you.
So Terminal Avenue, so this project's driven by both utility replacement and a desire to urbanize and enhance the streetscape through the downtown here. So the city is partnering with MOT to repave the stretch between Commercial and Esplanade. And we anticipate that there'll be a council presentation maybe in about a month or so, just to outline some of this project in a bit more detail. And we're optimistic that the project can be completed this year, but it'll depend on some aspects that are outside of the city's control. We have to negotiate some of the project details with the ministry, and we're working through that as we speak. Midtown Gateway, as Mr. Holm alluded to, this is a major project for the city. We've been working on developing this for more than a decade, and it's expected to be tendered potentially within the month. And it'll probably be about an 18-month construction period, and it'll be transformative for that Northfield entrance to the city corridor with the private development that's adjacent to it. So that's a significant upgrade right there. we wouldn't be complete in terms of a discussion around capital projects without highlighting some of these parks projects. However, parks will be coming at a later date to provide council with a more comprehensive and detailed update on these projects. So this slide is really just to acknowledge that these projects are in progress, and we'll be providing more information in probably a few weeks or a month. So I don't want to give the impression that things are all doom and gloom in terms of being able to deliver the capital program, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight some of the challenges that the city's experiencing. As I mentioned, the industry is extremely busy. We're competing with the private sector for those resources. Although the pandemic is hopefully waning, we have seen some delays in some of the, for example, some of the deliverables we're getting from consultants because they've had sicknesses in their office, staff sicknesses and being off work and so on. So that's created a little bit of a delay. Obviously, the supply chain is causing challenges with scheduling and cost certainty. Obviously, cost swings in many things because of inflation, because of the geopolitical issues. It's creating a pretty significant challenge, and it's making it difficult just all around to deliver projects, especially those where we're expecting specific timeframes and cost certainty. With that in mind, oh, we got some fancy stuff here. So with that in mind, staff have been reviewing the capital program, and what we've done is we've gone through and we've peeled off some of the projects that could be deferred by a year. They're really important projects, but they're not quite as urgent as some of the other ones. So these are mostly just utility projects that they can wait for a year. It'll provide staff a little bit of breathing room to focus on the more urgent projects. So that's it for my presentation. We have Phil Stewart in the background there. If you have some project-specific questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to come up. But open for questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosen. I don't see any questions. Councillor Bonner, yes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Couldn't let him leave without at least one question. Anyway, mostly it's actually a bit of a praise. I took my bike up to Woodgrove and went along Metro Drive to see how the work was being done. And while I was up there, I mean, it's a bit hard on the bike right now getting through that construction area, but it was a bit of fun as well. But I'm realizing that once that's done, we'll have multiple corridors from Woodgrove all the way to downtown. And that's for active transportation. So we have the NNR, ENN, and Metro will be part of that. We also have going down the highway. We have going down the large highway, the Island Highway, and we'll get over to 4th Street, and then from 4th Street we'll be able to get downtown. So we're starting to build this active transportation grid, and it's starting to come together, and I'm really appreciative of that. I do have a question regarding Metro Drive. How far is the work going to go before it's ended? Is it going to Superstore, or are we building active transportation routes all the way down to Woodgrove Mall?
Through Your Worship, Councillor Bonner, the project is carrying all the way to Alds.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thanks. Yeah, and no, I just wanted to thank you. There's a lot of work happening in the city, and we're quite right. We're breaking eggs here, but I think the overall benefits to our community will be seen for generations to come. So thanks very much for that.
Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. And to Councillor Bonner, I'm going to agree with you. Metro is beautiful, and I think Nanaimo has some really amazing cycling infrastructure that people don't realize we have. So I just want to note that. My question for you, the projects that we're delaying for a year, I'm guessing those are because Council has given the engineering, the Public Works and Engineering Department different direction. So we've reprioritized projects. The Albert Street upgrades, the Halliburton sidewalk, there's a few of them. Is that the reason that we're pushing a few projects off? Because we've reorganized the priority of them?
Through Your Worship, Councillor Hammonds, those projects are in the provisional plan that we have right now. It's just that given all the challenges we're having delivering the program, staff are wanting to find a way to moderate some of that workload a little bit. I mean, it's not just staff workload, but it's the market just doesn't have the capacity to do everything. So just from a realistic standpoint, knowing what challenges there are to deliver the program, we've picked off some projects that we know that we can delay by a year. It's just to help make sure that we can effectively deliver council's program.
Thank you. And I just want to say I appreciate that. I like it when staff bring us, you know, we have a time crunch, a resource crunch, or whatever crunch, and here are the things that we need to do because of it. So thank you. I appreciated that list, and I appreciate the presentation.
Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, staff, for all the work and the presentation. And I don't mean to be argumentative or contrary, but I have to follow up on the comments of my fellow councillors a few minutes ago. And I support active transportation improvements, and I'm pleased to see them happening, and I'm glad that they look nice and that we have bicycle lanes all through the city, which is great for the 1%. How do we answer, though, the complaints that we get from people who point out that with our population growing tremendously quickly, most of those people driving automobiles, whether we personally like that or not, how do we answer the complaint that these improvements to active transportation are coming at the expense of efficient flow of automobile traffic? And I include transit in that as well. In other words, we're narrowing streets in some cases to make way for other active transportation options. But at the same time, we're creating some potential log jams. So I would appreciate some type of comment on that.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Thorpe, certainly what you're describing is certainly, I would say, a deliberate focus on enhancing active transportation and transit modes of transportation. As you know, we have a transportation master plan from 2014 that has identified the challenges we have with accommodating mobility given the growth the city at the time was projected to have. The only way for the city to be able to accommodate that growth was to have a bit of a mode shift between personal vehicles and have them shift more towards some of those active modes and transit. And to do that, you have to provide facilities that the people are willing to use. We've been working very hard at that for quite a few years, and we're starting to make some gains. The reality is, until you have a fairly consistent linkage or network of suitable routes for people, there won't be as great an uptake as there will be once we do have all those connections in place. So recognizing that, it certainly has been a strategic focus on active transportation. That isn't to say that we've completely ignored like other safety-focused issues and so on. So, but certainly the focus has been on projects that are more holistic. We call them complete streets. So we're not ignoring personal vehicles or commercial use or commercial drivers, commercial transport and so on. But that certainly has been our focus.
Okay, thank you. And I may not totally agree, but I put you on the spot there and I appreciate your answering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I couldn't let that comment go by. I don't think we're building for the 1%. I think we're building for 7 generations later, so that we might not have automobiles with the price of gasoline, or we will have people switching to e-bikes as they want to be healthy and the price of gasoline. So I do have a question though, because I see as our population ages, or especially in our city, what about the scooters? Because a lot of people are using mobility scooters. Can they go on the bike lanes, or do they just use the sidewalks?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Hartman, my understanding with scooters is they're currently in a little bit of a gray area in terms of the bylaw. We need to make some updates to our bylaw to allow them to potentially to be legal. Right now they're using bike lanes, they're using sidewalks, but it's not legal. So we know this. We need to make some changes to our bylaw 5000.
Okay, and I'm just interested in the people who do use our bike lanes. Would it be an issue to have scooters using the bike lanes as well? I'm just wondering. Councillor Bonner.
Sorry, Your Worship, I didn't know that question was addressed to me. But I would think that we're building active transportation routes. We're not necessarily building bike lanes. And I do thank you for your comments regarding the other comment of the other councillor, and I don't mind being argumentative. We do have a massive transportation plan, and it specifically puts pedestrians, bikes and active transportation, transit, and then cars. And unless some other councillors wish to change the active transportation and put cars at top, I think we're actually doing a pretty good job of trying to catch up. So, and as far as scooters go, I think they could. There's plenty of lines. I've never been on a bike lane or on a lane that's shared with other people, like when I'm driving through Bowen Park, where there's ever been a problem and I'm bumping into people. Like there's always room. We just slow down, we go around, we take our time. You don't see road rage on bike lanes, you see it on car lanes. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Worship. Just not to pick on poor Councillor Thorpe too strongly here, but I would note that the public engagement through Reimagine was overwhelming in its advocation for active transportation corridors, and city plan responds not only to the transportation master plan, as Mr. Rosen pointed out, in its need to shift our mode more to active modes, but it built on that. So city plan does respond to that, and I think that the traffic issues that we have are not only not as a result of narrowing roads, et cetera. It's really a result of population growth, change that people are uncomfortable with. You know, Nanaimo is growing from a small town where you could park in front of the store you wanted to visit to a larger city. And yes, you're right, Councillor Thorpe, that there's more and more vehicles. But if we can get more and more of those trips by active transportation, we're helping that capacity challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Councillor Turley. Councillor Turley, you've got to unmute yourself.
I did hit the button, it didn't work. There we are.
Thank you.
Now it worked. So now that we're being argumentative, I couldn't resist throwing this in here with regard to Councillor Bonner's comment. While we may not have road rage, we do have bike lane stupidity. And I was witness to that several times. You'll get a chuckle out of this one. Fellows coming down Mexicanada cross over to the bike lane going north on Uplands with a cell phone in his ear, no helmet on, didn't stop at the crosswalk. Fortunately, I saw him coming as he didn't even look at me, he cut right in front of me. Now, if I had been a road rage person, I could have easily taken him out. But because I'm reasonably astute and being well aware of expecting the worst from some bicyclists, I avoided him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turley. I'd be tempted to respond with a short story. When we were visiting friends in the States many years ago in Portland, Oregon, when they didn't have mandatory motorcycle helmet laws, and every time a motorcycle would go ripping by, this right-wing Republican would say, I wonder what Darwin would have to say about this. I suspect the idiot who would do that is probably taking care of the problem himself. Mr. Rosen, I'm not going to contribute to the debate. I suspect, if truth be told, if the active transportation advocates knew how little we were spending on active transportation, they'd be upset, and the people who insist that we shouldn't spend anything on active transportation would be quite surprised. The truth is, the city's trying to achieve a balance, and staff are doing their best, trying to encourage and allow for and meet the goals of our transportation plan within limited budgets in tough circumstances, and spending the money, I think, very wisely, utilizing the necessary projects that Public Works has to engage in all the time. So all in all, I think you're doing a good job. And here I've gone and inspired Councillor Gesselbrock again. I was hoping to move quickly through the agenda. Just teasing. You go ahead, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Just to follow up, I think just to Mr. Rosen, a lot of appreciation for the engineering department building out, you know, the bare minimum of the active transportation grid that the majority of people support and the majority on council support. So thank you.
I'm not recognizing any other speakers on this issue. Thank you so much, Mr. Rosen, as always, for your contributions and the work of the Public Works Department. We have no committee minutes. I'm going to ask for a motion for adoption of the consent items, and if there's anything anyone's considered separately, then we can mention that after it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Markman moved, seconded by Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Delegations unrelated to agenda items? There are none. The next is the first of the reports, item 12A, Parcel Tax Repeal Bylaw 2022, number 7343. Ms. Mercer, good evening and welcome. You're just a little face on the screen here tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm here to talk about the parcel tax repeal bylaw. And so with the RDN's approval of the changes to the RDN's Regional Parks and Trails Service Area Amendment Bylaw, number 1231, the city will no longer be collecting these funds through a parcel tax. So the RDN board, as you know, approved the change to collect taxes to recover costs associated with the regional parks and trails through a requisition rather than a parcel tax. So as a result, the city of Nanaimo therefore needs to repeal the two bylaws relating to this parcel tax. So before you for repeal tonight are the Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Bylaw 2021 number 7324 and Parcel Tax Roll Preparation Bylaw 2021 number 7323. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have relating to this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercer. I am not seeing any questions. I think we understand the proposition. This is I will like to say a progressive change. I think Councillor Gesselbrock and I would certainly agree on this, quite appropriate. So I'm going to ask Councillor Gesselbrock to read the motion.
I'd like to move that the Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Repeal Bylaw 2022 number 7343 to repeal Parcel Tax Roll Preparation Bylaw 2021 number 7323 and Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Bylaw 2021 number 7324 pass first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Repeal Bylaw 2022 number 7343 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Councillor Turley.
Councillor Turley. Nearly missed you.
Yeah, that's okay. I was quick on the buttons this time. So a quick question. So if it's coming, we're still collecting the money to go to the RDN. How will it show up on the tax notice to citizens? Will it just be included in the taxes that we collect, or it be a separate item?
Through your worship to Councillor Turley, yes, it'll come through as the regional, lumped in with the regional district levy. So instead of having a separate line for parcel tax, it'll all be included in the RDN's amount. And it'll show on the tax notice.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that the Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Repeal Bylaw 2022 number 7343 pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Next item is 12B, Development Permit Application number DP 1258 and Development Variance Permit number DVP 431-3123 Robin Hood Drive. And that's Mr. Home, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This application, there's two components to this, and we could have attachment B brought up on the overhead just to identify the property, and I'll speak to the components of the application. So the first is a You can see the property, sorry, in the overhead in the Sherwood Forest area of the city, and in this application is in relation to a proposed 2-lot subdivision of the property. If you could bring up attachment D, that'll show the proposed subdivision and the areas that are subject to this application. The first component is a development permit, and the development permit relates to a water course, effectively a ditch that's fronting the property. You can see in the thank you very much. You can see in the outline in blue on the upper portion of the screen there, you can see the area of a proposed driveway access and site servicing to the property that would cross what is a protected water course under Development Permit Area 1. The request is to vary the water course setback of 7.5 meters to 0 meters to allow the driveway crossing and to allow servicing of the site. In regard to that part of the application, the applicant has provided a report from a qualified environmental professional that supports the proposal as presented and includes some recommendations regarding invasive species removal as well as planting to enhance habitat in the area. The qualified environmental professional has identified that there'll be no net loss of habitat, and in fact the habitat values will be enhanced through the planting and invasive removals. So that's the development permit with variance. The second part of the application, a development variance permit, and if you could go back to attachment D again, please. You'll see that a variance is also requested in relation to lot depth for a proposed subdivision. Quite a minor variance request from 30 meters to 29.6 meters, but the subdivision as proposed requires a minor lot depth variance. Notification's been provided in relation to the development variance permit for lot depth, and that's from 30 meters to 29.6 meters for both proposed lots A and B. And I'm happy to take any questions on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Holm. So I'm having a bit of a challenge with the term ditched water course, which I think you described as a man-made ditch. But what I really don't understand is why that would be considered a riparian. Does that mean all open ditches are considered riparian, like the ones along uplands, or just? I'm having a challenge with trying to figure out the justification for calling it riparian.
Yeah, sure, I can appreciate that. Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Turley. If you could bring up again the attachment E, kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at. So yeah, it looks like a ditch effectively, but if you go back to, sorry, attachment B, just to show the context of the property, you can see that it's actually, so you can see a water course flowing, thank you, that's great. You can see a water course flowing from the Lindley Valley. And you can see it eventually sort of, it ends up culverted in places and becomes a ditch along the way through Jester's Way, and then makes its way down to Departure Bay eventually. So I guess through the assessment that was done at the time that established the development permit area, there was value identified in protecting those portions of the water course, although they were effectively in the state of a ditch at that point, but they are part of a larger drainage system that originates in the Lindley Valley Park area and drains down to Departure Bay and daylights at certain points along the way. And it is not tributary to fish habitat, but there are other values that were identified there. I hope that helps. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, I'll take your word for it. To me, it means that all open ditches do end up draining somewhere. So does that mean they're all riparian as well? But that's okay, I'm not going to debate it right now. Thanks.
If there are no further questions, would someone move the motion? Moved Councillor Himmins, seconded Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? Councillor Gesselbrock, motion carries. Thank you. The next is Development Variance Permit Application number DVP 432 and 2384 Mill Road. Mr. Holm, please, again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, this application relates to a proposed 2-lot subdivision, and it is for a request to vary the required lot depth for the subdivision. This property is in the Westwood Lake area. If you could bring up attachment B, it's on Mill Road in the Westwood Lake area. You can see it outlined in red and hatched on the overhead. And if you could please bring up attachment D, you'll see the proposed subdivision plan. The development variance permit is requested for lot depth again. Proposed lot A, the requested variance is from 30 meters to 26.43 meters. And for proposed lot B, it's from 30 meters to 29.44 meters. And as you can see outlined on the overhead, there's still significant buildable area on the proposed lots, as is despite the minor request for lot depth variance. Happy to take any questions. Notification's been, of course, provided to neighbors as required. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
I don't see any. Moved by Councillor Hammond, seconded by Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. I would suggest politely the last two applications have been some nice examples of infilling in the city without the need for extra roads, et cetera, et cetera. Item D is the short-term rental operator's guide. And this is just for information. And Mr. Lindsay, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And as you said, this is simply for information. So as Council's aware, throughout last year, you completed a review of your short-term rental regulations, and that culminated in a new bylaw that was introduced in the fall. You ultimately adopted that zoning bylaw amendment in earlier this year. But one of the recommendations that Council made last fall was to develop an operator's guide, really for those who are looking to get into short-term rental, or those who may be operating and are wishing now to comply with the city's regulations. So we're simply here this evening to share with you the guide that's being created by staff, which we hope serves the community in terms of answering many of those frequently asked questions and providing links to where they can provide or where they can connect with new information regarding short-term rentals. So again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Councillor Bonner and then Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a little question on how we're getting the word out. I see the summary points that we're going to be putting on the city website, but how are we not actually sending this to the short-term rental units that we know of in the city?
That's correct, Your Worship. I think there's a number of ways we'll get the word out. The website, we're certainly going to be following up tomorrow with a press release on this, but we do have the ability to identify those that are using certain online platforms and connect with those people directly. So looking at multiple ways to try to get this information out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. To you, to Mr. Lindsay. The one thing I didn't see in there, and perhaps it wasn't meant to be in there, is carriage houses that are on the same piece of property. But obviously, the owner can't live in both places. Is that precluded from being a short-term rental, or what's the status on that?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship, to Councillor Turley. So it's intended to be captured under a secondary suite. So we would consider those detached secondary suites. They are called carriage homes or other terminology often. So if that's not clear, that's good to know. And as we do updated versions of this document, it's something that we can certainly take back and look at. But yes, covered under secondary suites.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If no further questions. Mr. Holmes, Mr. Lindsay, thank you. Bylaws, Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 6500.045. Councillor Gesselbrock, please.
I'd like to move that the Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 6500.045 to include the Bowers District Master Plan as Schedule M of the Official Community Plan Bylaw 208-2008, number 6500, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Turley, do you have a question? Your hand's just up. I think that means the hand is going down. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is 13B, Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 6500.047. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Move that the Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2021, number 6500.047, to redesignate 30 Mackey Road on the Official Community Plan Schedule A, Future Land Use Plan Map 1 from Neighborhood to Light Industrial, and to redesignate 330 Mackey Road on the Chase River Neighborhood Plan Schedule A, Future Land Use and Mobility from Low Medium Density Residential to Service Industrial Enterprise Area be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. We have no notices of motion. Under other business, we have Councillor Armstrong's motion, re the Caledonia Warming Centre. Given her absence, Ms. Gurry, over to the next meeting, would that be the appropriate course?
That would be the normal process, Your Worship. Given the time frame, though, set out for the warming center being only open for the month of March, by the next meeting, it could very well be waived. She might not wish to move forward, but yes, as it's her motion, unless another member of council wished to move it and talk about it, we would defer it till she returns.
Thank you very much. That takes care of that. Any question period items?
No questions, Your Worship.
Not seeing any. Councillor Martman moves for adjournment.
Boom.
Councillor Gesselbrock seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Thank you very much, council, staff. Appreciate the attendance tonight as always.
Oh my God.